Listening. The book's definition of listening is that it is the active process of making meaning out of another person's spoken message. The importance of listening. Being a good listener is one of the most important skills you can have. Listening skills are important, especially in the workplace. Not listening can lead to breakdowns, and those are never good at work. For example, they said, imagine if your manager didn't listen to employees about equipment having problems, and then it went down for a week. That obviously would not go very well with the boss. The ability to listen effectively is important to our success in a variety of contexts. That is a quote from the book that I found to be very true. Some misconceptions about listening. Here's a few myths out there when it comes to listening. The first one is that hearing is the same as listening. This is wrong because hearing is just merely the perception of sound. Just because we hear something does not mean that we are listening to it. Next, listening is natural and effortless. This is easy to think because we are constantly listening every single day. However, we have to acquire good listening skills through repetition and learning from mistakes. Lastly, all listeners hear the same message. Like we just said, you need to be able to acquire good listening skills, which means everybody is on different levels of being a good listener. Just because a group of people all heard the same presentation does not mean that they all listened and retained the same information. Ways of listening. Now we will begin to talk about the different ways of effective listening. The first stage, hearing, which is how the listening process begins according to mindtools.com. Next is understanding, because simply hearing something isn't enough. You also have to be able to understand and retain the information. After that is the third stage of the HER model, remembering. The ability to remember what you have previously heard helps you to communicate with others much more effectively. Now to interpreting. Interpreting, which is one of the most important, so we understand the context and seriousness of the message. Then we have evaluating. Evaluating, which is where you separate facts and opinions and decide whether something is true or untrue. And then lastly, we have responding. The last stage is just to indicate to the speaker that we are listening, and it's better known as giving feedback. Now we will move on to the types of listening. First off, we have informational listening. This type of listening is most likely happens when you are watching TV, in class, or at work. Informational listening is also known as listening to learn, because we are supposed to remember the material that we are being taught. Critical listening is to be used when the goal is to evaluate or scrutinize what is being said, according to skillsyouneed.com. This type of listening is much more active because it usually involves problem solving or decision making. Now we're on to sympathetic listening. Sympathetic listening is said to be one of the most challenging types of listening. Why, you may ask? Because when emphatic listening occurs, the listener attempts to identify with and understand what the speaker is going through. This type requires two skills: perspective taking, which is the ability to understand the situation from another individual's point of view. And then the second skill is emphatic concern, or otherwise known as the ability to identify how someone else is feeling and experience them feelings with them. Alright, now we'll review what we've gone over. We discussed the importance of listening and why. Then we talked about a few of the misconceptions about listening. And lastly, we went over different ways and types of listening. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.